Hamptons Sports and Leisure Centre, formerly the Marconi Club, was recently sold to the Chancellor Muslim Society with plans presented to use the building as a place of worship. This was met with significant concern within the local community. Firstly, let's examine what these key concerns are. Since the building and adjoining residential development was built, local residents have suffered with parking demand for events at Hamptons regularly exceeding the 98 car park spaces. This has often resulted in vehicles parked on estate roads and pavements, and even on the designated public open space, not even owned by Hamptons. With plans presented to use the building as a mosque for 1,000 worshippers, there's a very real concern that these existing problems will be made far worse under the new plans. The use of Hamptons by CMS would mean the building would be used for 5 times daily prayers. This can be as early as 3 AM and as late as 11 PM. This will likely cause disturbance at unsociable hours to the adjoining residential amenity. The closure of the bars will reduce interest and demand for private hire significantly. Additionally, with changes proposed to existing spaces within the building to be converted or used for religious use, further reduces the availability of the building for community use and hire. As you will see later, the CMS proposals for the building have been subject to constant change, seemingly in response to address concerns raised within the local community and presumably in an attempt to appease the local planning department and satisfy local policies with regards to any change of use of Hamptons. The local council has policies in place to protect community facilities such as Hamptons from change of use, which would not be permitted unless CMS can prove that it's either no longer economically viable, or that it was no longer required to meet the needs of the local community, or that it would be replaced by another facility in a suitable location, or the needs of the new provision outweigh the loss of the previous use. Or they could of course just claim that it will continue as a sports and leisure centre and that a change of use planning application was not required. Let's now look at a timeline of events leading to where we are today. In early 2018, CMS were in line to purchase council-owned land at 279 Beehive Lane, with plans to build a new mosque. However, this deal fell through, leaving CMS to reach out to local MP Vicky Ford, complaining that they've been unfairly treated by the council. Fast forward to 2019, and CMS set their sights on purchasing Hamptons, and in October of that year, contracts were exchanged for the sale for £2.35 million, with a deadline of the following February to raise the required funds. At this point, no one was really aware that Hamptons was even for sale. This triggered the start of multiple crowdfunding pages by CMS, requesting donations to the charity for the purchase of Hamptons. These sources provide a clear indication of their original intentions, promising donors a mosque for the Essex area that can easily accommodate 1,000 worshippers, that its 2 large halls and several smaller rooms will cater for prayer facilities, Islamic education, segregated women's areas, and funeral facilities, and that the building would be known as the Chelmsford Islamic Centre. At this stage, there was little or no mention of the activities and community uses that Hamptons currently provides. Early the following year, CMS held a fundraising event at Hamptons in which their plans for the building were equally as clear.
This is your chance. Build this mosque so that you can help them. They need us to build these centers. Build this mosque now. Finish this job.
The building itself currently does not hold consent for use as a place of worship. Under the Freedom of Information Act, we requested full details of the existing lawful use class of the building. The council, however, refused to provide this information, claiming that it wasn't in the public interest, and that as they'd sought legal advice regarding the use of Hamptons, this information attracted legal privilege protection. The Information Commissioner's Office would later rule that the council was correct to withhold this information, claiming that its disclosure would inhibit the council's ability to defend its position in a potential future legal dispute. In mid-January, the news of the sale of Hamptons to the CMS became public knowledge, and the planning department at Chelmsford City Council contacted CMS requesting details of their plans with a view to advising them whether a change of use planning application would be required. They also advised them that continued use as a sports and leisure centre would not require planning consent, depending upon the scale of the worship element. It would prove to be 6 months and many chasing emails later before this information was finally provided by CMS. At the end of January 2020, a public meeting was held in which over 400 club members and local residents attended. The CMS and local MP Vicky Ford were invited but chose not to attend. The plans as stated on the funding pages were presented to the community, and the scale of the objection to these plans was very clear.
Everybody who's opposed to the plans as they currently are, please raise your hand.
Parish and City Councillor Sue Young did attend, and after previously stating that she had no concerns, was asked the question again by a local resident.
As our councillor, who's supposed to represent us, do you have any concerns?
Yes.
Although CMS did not attend the meeting, a statement was issued and read to the community. This was the point at which we started to see a change of narrative from CMS regarding their future plans for Hamptons. Now promoting continuation as a sports and leisure centre focusing on health and fitness, investing in the tennis and squash clubs and services for the community, and revamping the bar area as a cafe for the community. And with regards to the use for worship,
for daily prayers, we do not expect numbers to be beyond 15 to 30 people, lasting approximately 10 to 20 minutes.
CMS later said in a meeting with Sue Young and the management company for the residential estate that their funding pages were just historic literature they can't amend. They did, however, indicate their plans to use the main hall every Friday for weekly prayers for up to 300 people. CMS then began revising the funding pages, which they apparently couldn't amend, including reducing the number of worshippers to 500, before removing this reference completely, and removing references to use of rooms to be used specifically for prayers. Shortly after the completion of the sale in February, the bars were closed and the existing long-term tenants were served notice of termination. This included a Buddhist group who used the centre for meditation and the on-site catering business, both of whom have now left. On the 21st of March, the developing COVID-19 pandemic took its toll on Hamptons as government restrictions forced its closure.
We're also telling nightclubs, theatres, cinemas, gyms and leisure centres to close on the same timescale.
All members of staff, having previously been told they'd be subject to redundancy consultations, were placed on the government's job retention scheme. Meanwhile, the planning department continued to chase CMS for details of their plans, and at the end of April stated that the council would like to take the opportunity of the current lockdown to advise whether a change of use planning application would be required. They were also advised that any use of the building for worship would need to be investigated by the compliance team. CMS responded, claiming that they wanted to keep the building exactly as it was and just use 2 rooms for prayers. As the enforced lockdown continued, in mid-June, the planning department again chased CMS for details of their plans, before finally, on the 26th of June, CMS submitted their proposals, and the scale of the change of narrative became very clear. CMS advised that they do not plan to submit a change of use, as they wanted to buy the centre for community use, just with the inclusion of 1 room, similar to a multi-faith room. but with multiple other uses. They promoted a play and pray ethos, expecting that most members of Hamptons will attend the centre for an activity and then use the area afterwards for prayer, with likely numbers expected to be a lot less than the 30 members their current mosque has on a daily basis. These submissions included floor plans, which, despite such little proposed use for worship, showed alteration of the bar and associated rooms to be dedicated religious ablution facilities. This contradicts what was previously said, where it was claimed the bar would become a community cafe. CMS also revealed that they'd sought advice on their submission from local councillor Graham Pooley. Interestingly, Councillor Pooley is currently a member of the Chelmsford City Council Planning Committee. Local Government Association guidance states that councillors should not give material advice in planning considerations. Meanwhile, the funding page is continued, including starting a new one to recover debt from the purchase and raise £15,000 to carpet prayer rooms and £50,000 to convert the bar area to wudu and ghusl facilities. Despite having no decision or consent from the planning department, and in the knowledge that any use of the building for worship would be investigated, CMS then began using Hamptons weekly for prayers.
Okay, and so is that now fully operational as the mosque?
No.
We witnessed up to 80 worshippers on occasion, with a distinct lack of social distancing being observed. This use was and remains a breach of planning control and was reported to the council by a number of local residents. Finally, on the 23rd of September, and after 12 weeks of consideration of the plans submitted by CMS, the planning department ruled that a change of use planning application will be required. However, they also confirmed that the ongoing planning breaches would not be subject to any enforcement, instead allowing them to continue this use until such time a planning application had been submitted and considered by the council. With no timescale or deadline specified, this provides CMS with no legal obligation to submit a planning application in a timely manner. Planning enforcement should be applied consistently and fairly to all, in line with what the community were told from Councillor Sue Young at the public meeting back in January.
There is enforcement to ensure that planning permission is there.
The council's justification for not enforcing this planning breach is that it's not causing any harm to the local amenity. Local residents would, however, disagree and are becoming increasingly angry that religious gatherings are being allowed to continue without enforcement, even under the stricter COVID-19 regulations, for a building that has no consent for worship and should therefore not benefit from such exemption. In response to complaints received, the Environmental Health Department have been handing out unqualified and incorrect planning advice, stating that consent for worship is not required, as CMS are merely hiring space within the building. Aside from being incorrect in planning terms, it is not a third-party hire. CMS now own the land, the building and the business. Hamptons have claimed on their social media that the building has been used by various religions for many years, including weekly church services.
It's totally fake news. Made up, fake.
Essex police appear to support this somewhat incorrect statement, and instead of deploying officers to inspect COVID-19 compliance at Hamptons, are providing a very visible presence outside the building during prayer sessions, for reasons of which are unclear. This regular police presence reflects poorly on the image of the residential estate and is frustrating some residents who are trying to sell their properties. The requirement for a change of use planning application will now provide all local residents, along with local authorities, with the opportunity for consultation and allow them to submit their comments either for or against the application. We have no issue with the right to worship or Islam in general. Our mission is to inform and encourage consultation, engagement and public discussion of the plans of Chelmsford Muslim Society. On balance of the evidence laid out, we question whether CMS are being truthful about their long-term plans for Hamptons, and to what extent the building will remain a much loved and valued asset for the whole community. We would question the suitability of this building, and in this location, to meet the requirements of the plans that were initially presented to their donors. Please see the link below for a petition to Chelmsford City Council to enforce the breach of planning control until a change of use planning application is submitted. Please also check out our website and social media platforms and sign up to our mailing list to be kept updated with the progress of our campaign and any future planning application.